So nice to see you again, Claire, and it's been good to have a bit of a catch up and a bit of starting to talk about what you wanted to bring to supervision today. So, do you want to give us an outline, the topic that or topics you're thinking about now?
Yeah, it's funny because you start to initially I was like, oh, what is it that I want to bring? And then quite quickly, quite a few things kind of come up. I've had a few situations, I suppose, since we last spoke. There was, and I think I can probably break it down into two parts, but it might be that they intertwine in some way. One is getting new clients or having discovery calls, or I give like I suppose like a free introductory, let's have some chats, as a lot of us do. And I have had a few situations recently where I felt like they were going very well, and then it didn't necessarily become or they didn't necessarily become a client, or haven't yet become a client. And there's quite a few recent ones, and I feel like I'm not entirely sure how to follow up in a way that is not putting, I don't want to put pressure on anybody, but at the same time, I know that they were very interested. I don't think it was in sincere interest. I think that it was right for them. So it's just kind of getting that balance between the two. And I've, because I need to keep replenishing the client base. So that's one area. And then the second area, and I don't know if these feed into each other or not, but they're both relationship based, is that when I'm with clients, especially clients that I've had for a while, and I believe that I'm quite good at building up rapport with clients, and I really enjoy it. It gives me a real buzz. It's something I love in coaching. But sometimes I wonder if, and I probably more than wonder if, but I fear perhaps that I may be going further towards friendship than coach. I don't think it's actually friendship. It's not like I sit there talking about me or anything like that. But I there feels like there's a little bit of a shift. And I suppose I'd love to discuss some strategies to keep useful as a coach without, once you know somebody quite well over all these coaching sessions, it's quite easy to slip into a little bit of friendship. Does that make sense? So I think those are two areas I think would be really useful for today.
Okay, and like you say, that there might be the unifying theme is about the other person and a relationship, and there might or might not be a more sort of closer connection, and we can't assume, can we? But let's see. What's important to you about both of these things about getting them making some progress with them?
Um, so the first thing that came into my head there was what's important about both of them is, I guess, client retention,
Yes.
because both with making sure that the discovery calls lead into clients, but also with having a client to continue to be useful and valuable to them and help them progress. Both ways, it's client retention. But I say this with a bit of a caveat, which is something that I've always like I've often felt as a little bit of a, a tricky part of coaching, which is, as a coach, we're there to help or support the individual and to feel empowered to work towards their goals or their journey, whatever it might be. And we are there to help enable that process, with accountability and so on. And if we were to have done in my head, it's like, if I was to do a really good job, they don't need me anymore. So then there's that kind of funny thing between, if a client wants to continue seeing you, and this is where I think I get confused with my friendship and the coaching thing. It's like they want to continue seeing me, but have I done my job well enough? Because actually, I'd like them to have the independence to go off and thrive themselves. But then I also want the client retention. So there's this really, really strange kind of push and pull going on in my head there. So I'm nervous of saying client retention because I do feel that it is our job as coaches to ensure that people feel set free as part of the process of working with a coach. Does that make sense? I feel like that's it's a bit of a weird one, but I actually think sometimes as well, like when people who are unfamiliar with coaching, and I may explain the difference between maybe some of the traditional therapies. It's actually one of the things, traditional therapies and coaching, it's one of the things that I bring up, is that with perhaps with the traditional therapies, you don't necessarily know the end point of where you're going to. It's repeated and whatever. Whereas with coaching, we have this journey where in theory it's not completion, but you get to a stage where you can then have whatever it is that you need to keep going when you're right.
Okay, I think, and there's so many things within that, isn't there?
My head's like,
yeah, no, I don't. But I mean, and you're right. There's the integrity thing, you know. And I do read posts on Instagram and wherever, you know, how to keep your clients for longer. No,
yeah,
you know, and it's icky, isn't it?
it is a bit.
Okay, so it is retention, but it's not retention. And in the first one, is it acquisition more than retention?
Yes, you're right. That is, yes, yes. And I suppose that I don't know if it's lucky or if it's gone well in the past, but it was almost like the majority, or almost all. By the time I was having a discovery call with somebody, I was able to, like, you know, it's awful, but like seal the deal. Like, you know, that you're right for them, they're right for you, and I know that I can help. And that's the most fantastic feeling, to be like, I know that I'm going to be able to help this person. And that's so lovely, because then you also have a successful client relationship. It's wonderful. But yeah, the last couple, I think, have not gone that way. And maybe I just lost my way a little bit in terms of that. But you're right, that's more acquisition versus retention. And then the other one is retention, but with the guilt in the back of my head that I'm not really meant to be retaining clients.
Okay. So if the word isn't retention, then is there another word to describe what's important about this for you?
If the word isn't retention, well, I suppose business viability comes up, because these are two things which is, you know, you need for a business. But I don't know, I think at the very depth of all of this is like, I really feel deeply like I really want to do a good job for whoever I work with. Like, it's such an ingrained kind of a huge part of me. Like, I give myself to something. Like, it's so important to me that they feel better. Maybe that's why I'm kind of slightly confused as to what it is I really want out of this, because I want to have repeated business, absolutely, but I really want to do a really, really good job. And I'd like them to feel, you know, valued and encouraged and really good. I'm not sure what I can replace the word retention with. Maybe satisfaction, or satisfaction feels a bit bland, but, you know, and joy feels too far. Too far. So it needs to be somewhere between satisfaction and joy, with a good sprinkling of value.
So we've got something between like a menu and a dictionary, haven't we? Like,
somewhere, yeah. I might just get the thesaurus out.
but there's something there, isn't it? Satisfaction, joy, like engagement, experience, whatever those words are. So it's about how that person feels when they've got you as their coach.
Yeah, actually, it's very much how they feel, because in either case, and I suppose that feeds into my own insecurities as well, because, you know, is it something that I've done that hasn't made them feel like they want to sign up with me, or is it something, and then there's just like, is it something that I've done that they want to stay with me when I should be letting them go free? So it's funny, because it's the opposite ends in that way. But yeah, I really, yeah, it does actually come down to quite a lot about how they're feeling about the process itself.
Okay, and they'll feel presumably a different way when they don't know you, when they've just had a discovery call versus their 3 or 6 or 9 sessions in with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose there's that, you know, I think about I think I've got a friendly demeanor even in the discovery one-to-ones, and it's not for everybody. I'm not going to be for everybody, and I'm very comfortable with that. Uh, and vice versa. Not everybody's right for me, so it goes both ways in that. But yes, maybe that's why I sometimes start to fall towards friendship. Friendship makes us all feel good. You know, there's a lot towards that. But and as I say, it's not friendship. It's not like they're going to call up and have a chat and whatever. It's not a two-way thing. I'm not turning around and sharing all of my own stuff. But friendship makes you feel good. It makes me feel good too. Like I enjoy. Like I'm looking forward to seeing my next client because I've had for quite a while. And but then I said something like looking forward to catching up. It's like, no, it's not a catch up. I'm not having a chit chat. You know, and you got to, and I noticed myself like moving into that's what I'd say to my friend. It's not a catch up session. So I want to kind of be quite focused after this call and ensure that even though I know her quite well and she knows my methods quite well, it's still going to be a valuable session for her with a coach.
So, I mean, I'm getting all sorts of images of like, you know, the sort of sitting on the fence or the metaphor being here or being there and so on. So I've got a billion questions bubbling away, but let me not rush ahead and just check. Where should we start with all of this? Should we start with the relational stuff with your existing clients, or should we start with the discovery calls with your prospects? Where's the best place?
Yeah, let's start with the existing clients because it may just be that I feel slightly burned because of one discovery call last week, whereas I have a few clients that I have I've built a strong rapport with, that I'm conscious of this balance. So yeah, let's start in that area.
Okay. Fine. And if we get to the other, we get to the other. Let's see how we go. It might sort of blend in. So you haven't used exactly these words, but I think the implication behind all of this is there's something that is too friendly, right? As a coach. Is that what it is? Is it you don't want to be too friendly with them?
I think I just sometimes blur the line between I don't want to do myself a disservice because I don't think I really blur the line. I think I'm always being a coach and I'm always being professional. I absolutely do believe those things, but there is a little bit of blurring. And I attended a session recently, a psychotherapy session about like the emotions during coaching, which was a very useful session. But naturally, you know, things come up in coaching sessions which we as the coach might be triggered by or recognize something in ourselves or whatever it might be. And I suppose that even things like that, even if I don't say anything, there may be a tendency within me that I feel like a bigger draw to somebody or a closeness to somebody, even though it's not a shared experience. It's like I feel like there's a shared understanding. I'll never turn around and say, oh yeah, me too, I had like that doesn't happen, obviously. But I just wonder how, or if there's any kind of strategies just to keep those boundaries, those coaching boundaries in place, whilst also recognizing that over time, a relationship does develop. It's not like, you know, it's not going to be the same on session 1 as it is on session 8 or 10 or whatever it might be. Yeah, and I need to just be a little, like, I just feel like I need to be a little bit careful of that blur. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I want to ask you about being careful in a moment, but I want to go back to what you said a moment ago, which was obviously I don't say, oh yeah, me too, I've had that. Well, you know, my experience in coaching training is that new coaches do that all the time.
Right.
And coaches learn to not do that, learn to just clock it. Oh yeah, me too. Yeah. And you clock it, right, rather than you say anything. So talk a bit about your journey from when you might have done that, and then you've learned that actually that's not a helpful thing to do.
That's why I can't quite recall how I used to do that side of things, but I feel like I like to give a little of myself in a session. For example, it might be something that's not necessarily about whatever the goals are for that particular session or anything, but it might be something like, I just had to pick up my kid from school because they're sick. And I would do something like, oh, I hear you. My son was ill last week. It's such a pain. And they're just something where there's a little bit of give of myself, understanding. I think I've always been quite conscious of not bringing things back to me when you're in a coaching session. Although I recognize that, and obviously I recognize because I'm talking about it right now, it is quite easy to fall into something like that. I can't actually remember my early coaching sessions, which is wonderful because it's been a few years and it's nice to be in a kind of more experienced place. But I can see how easily you might overshare.
Yeah. Okay. So if we take the continuum from never sharing when someone who you're both parents and she says, oh God, I just picked up my sick child, and you say absolutely nothing, like this, versus, oh yeah, me too, and 10 minutes and he had this and he had that and I was on the phone to the doctor, and like I'm doing right now, like just gushing, right? Is there, and different for each client, is there an optimum? I mean, does it always have to be nothing? Can you do a bit? Can you recognize when there's too much? What's your view?
You see, now this comes down to perhaps individuals and whatever. I don't think I'm going to be somebody who doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
It's not my way. And I think that the clients that sign up with me aren't looking for somebody like that, because we pick up on people so quickly, and I think that I'd like to think that my clients enjoy some of that. It's not a banter, but like a friendly interaction and understanding of where they are. And if I think about who my clients are and who I tend to attract, that they are not totally dissimilar to me in terms of age and where they are in their life cycle and responsibilities. So I perhaps I do have better boundaries than I think. Perhaps it is that I'm very comfortable with sharing a little bit. I'm going to do that. I like doing that, and I enjoy that closeness, and I think it actually furthers my relationship with people because I think it helps me be more real. Yeah. I think that's a really lovely thing in coaching when you want to be real. You want to be. There needs to be a level of being authentic and true. Well, not a level. I believe in always being authentic, but I don't think I do go too. I don't think in my idea, I think it is too far to then go on and chat for 10 minutes, right? I don't think that I wouldn't do that. So perhaps the boundaries are better than I think. Maybe it's nice to be friendly. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's one of those things I'm questioning myself as a coach because I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure, but then I know that I'm not going to not say something in response to, if someone's talking about their family, I'll probably share.
So we've got, and this is that classic. I mean, 10 Jews, 11 opinions, right? It said, isn't it? Well, probably 10 coaches, 20 opinions on this, definitely. And I think yours and my views are quite aligned. My view on this is like, I have this little expression, which is humanity trumps process. Like actually our common humanity, and they say sleepless nights and you're like, oh, sleepless nights, God, yeah. And that's all. I get you, you get me, and that's all that's needed, I think. So you're saying that you think the boundaries are maybe better than perhaps you give yourself credit for. So say a bit more about that.
Yeah, I also just want to remember humanity trumps process. That's great.
I need to rewrite that expression because it has a Trump in it, which is a bit annoying. But
yeah. But I'm just clocking the expression. Boundaries is an interesting one. I think boundaries is always an interesting one because it tends to come up in coaching sessions anyway with clients in all sorts of ways. Whether it's that word that's used or not, it doesn't have to be the word boundaries, but we know kind of what we're thinking when I use that word. And I think it's important as a coach. I remember in some of my earlier one-to-one coaching sessions, I would take on an enormous amount of the emotion from my client, and so much so that there'd been times where I was like up in the night thinking about something, you know, or replaying something that I wish that I'd said or done, or whatever, so that to help further. And I don't do that anymore. And that is a boundary for me that I've made sure it's like I can't go there. It's not useful for me to spend my time that way, and I'm not further helping my client at that point. So boundaries is something which I think that I'm constantly aware of, and as a mother and in my life, I've got teenagers, and it's I've got aging parents, and boundaries is a big thing. So I think it's something I'm probably aware of without noticing that I'm aware of it. Mm. So when you ask me about me thinking that my boundaries might be better, I think that they probably are, because as I constantly am self-improving, I think that and growing and learning and whatever it is, I think that boundaries are so important that they start to become natural. And my boundaries are not going to be the same as another coach who might be, watching this or whatever. Like we're going to be different the way that we do things. But I actually think I'm quite good with people. So I'd like to feel a bit more confident than I did at the beginning of this conversation, that actually perhaps my boundaries are perfectly aligned to who I am anyway. And that is that maybe I'm not building a friendship as such. I'm just, opening up the right amount for the relationship to feel, real and helpful to the person that I'm working with.
So let's just hear some of that language. Your boundaries are perfectly aligned, that you're doing it in a way that is real and that's helpful to your client. Your words. I mean, how do those resonate when you say those things?
Did I say aligned with? Did I actually say that?
Yes.
Oh,
you said perfectly, not just aligned, but perfectly aligned.
Perfectly aligned. Wow. I'm not a fan of the word perfect. I should probably have considered using, but I think it's just a reminder to myself to be confident in what comes naturally. Because sometimes you can't. I think I came on here asking for strategies, but actually I'm going to be who I'm going to be. And these relationships are continuing. Yes. With clients. And yes, okay, I did talk about, wanting to make sure I always got the discovery calls when they became clients, but actually most of the time they do. So I suppose there must be something right happening there that's happening naturally. I like to think that I'm aligned with myself. Also, Alexa just went off. I like to think that I'm aligned with with who I am and being true to myself. I think it's actually something that's immensely important in terms of my own values about myself. I'm honest, and I like to. I want what you see is what you get, yeah. And that's important to me. So going back to that word boundaries as well, boundaries is what I said. We don't always use that word because sometimes it feels quite restrictive. And I don't want to be restricted, but I suppose there's always that thing in the back of my mind, which is, the client is the priority. The client comes first. I want to be led by the client so that I can offer the best support in whatever that session might be dealing with. Yeah, I like the idea that I said, which surprises me, that that I'm perfectly aligned with who I am, because that's probably one of the most important things to me as a person. Forget being a coach. Like, that's really important to me.
Well, let's. I've got a couple of scenarios playing out. So scenario one is you know you've been on training or you've had feedback or whatever reason you think okay I need to do my boundaries a bit more formal, a bit less responsive, a bit just say a few percent. Um, would you notice and would that feel okay? Reducing it from where you're currently at.
I think I'd notice.
Yeah.
I definitely notice, because it would have to be a focused decision to actually do it, because I think I let myself, go naturally. I think in the early days of coaching, I was constantly like thinking about what the next thing was to say and thinking about what your question should be, and so on and so forth. And now, and for quite a while, I let things run naturally, and that definitely creates really useful, fantastic coaching sessions. So I'm much more confident in allowing that to happen. So I think if I were to be, I think you use the word, like, do you use the word professional? I'm trying to work out like what change I would be making. I don't know. I think it might feel a little bit restrictive.
Yeah. No, I don't think I use the word professional because I think that would
No,
imply that this way of being would be unprofessional, which I don't.
no. But I'm
Formal,
just
maybe formal. That,
formal. You did use. Thank you. You used the word formal. Yeah, I'm not very formal.
yeah.
I'm not that I'm totally informal either. But I would have to really think about that change, even if it was only slight. And I like the fluidity of the coaching sessions that I run, and that I have. So it would need to be quite an intentional change. And I'm not quite sure what that looks like.
Okay.
What do you think it might look like?
I think what not for you, but for anyone, I think what it would look like is yeah, like being a more self-censorship, yeah, a bit more guarded, like when I said to you a few minutes ago, two Jews, three opinions, and we're both of Jewish heritage. That's a phrase we know, and for me, it's fine. It's not doing stuff like that, right? It's thinking that in my head and say, oh, don't do that, don't use that, that's not okay. That type of thing, or when you say, oh, the kids in GCSEs, I'm like, how does that feel? Rather than, oh yeah, God, my kids too. It's dialing down our internal sort of loveliness, our tendency to want to just do that little bit. I think that's what it is. So effectively, I suppose at the extreme end, it's like the client, as I've had in my experience of therapy, I come out and I don't know whether my therapist has kids or where they live, or like I know not they are a very good therapist, but they're like a blank canvas. That's what for me the end of formal is.
Yeah, and that's too far for me, I think.
Yeah.
But also I think it's worth saying that these, these to carry on using the words, like these slight informalities, I think it's something that comes over time. I don't think it's immediate and early in the sessions. I think that as the trust and the relationship develops, I think that stuff comes out. Yeah, I do think quieting some of the chatter in the mind though is quite a helpful technique. But I do I'm it's funny when you're trying to think back on your behaviors when obviously when a session's going, it's just going, right? But I think I do. I don't think I chatter too much. Even if sometimes I'm tempted to.
Yes. Okay. And that's helpful to know. And when you're saying that that feels too formal, I want to ask about if you go to the other end of the scale. Let's say, that stereotype I've described of the very new coach who hasn't quite worked out how the processes work, and they do overshare. Imagine, you're coaching someone you get on really well with, and you do say more than you would normally say, and they ask you maybe a couple of questions, and how old are your kids, or GCSEs, or whatever, and you're in it a bit more than you normally are. And I know I'm asking you to guess here, right? But when you finish that coaching session, what do you think your reflective thoughts would be if you've overshared?
That I don't think I don't want to feel like I've overshared. That's not a comfortable place for me. And if that was a reflection that I had, I definitely want to rein it in for another time. I think that you need to be careful because questions do sometimes come. And I think that's lovely. I think it's really it's a beautiful thing. It's like it's an emerging relationship where somebody's also showing interest in you. But that's not what we're there for.
Yeah.
So I think that if it were to get to that stage, and I was reflecting, I certainly want to make changes, or perhaps avoid scenarios where the opportunity to ask questions back was perhaps quite as easy. Because I remember I used to, like at the beginning of my coaching journey, I used to almost not forget, but not place enough importance on setting a goal for the session itself. And I think that actually knowing to do that is very grounding and also stops that tendency to kind of go off on tangents where I suppose questions or oversharing or any of that kind of stuff can happen. And I actually really enjoy that grounding of the goal for the session, not only because that's great because we've got a focus to work on together, but and it makes for a more powerful session because you're working around or through something or towards something. But yeah, it stops. I think it stops that kind of tendency to just chat.
Yeah.
Because when you get on with somebody, you can just chat. I certainly can. Quite happily. And I literally those people where I'm like, oh, I'd really get on with this person. Go out for a glass of wine, have a bit of a chit chat. That'd be lovely. It's like, no, that's not where we are. This is not the relationship. Yeah. So so I think that to answer your question, if I felt like I overshared, I would not be comfortable with that. And oversharing for me is probably going to be more than it is for somebody else, perhaps, or less for somebody else. But also, I think that for me, focusing on the goal for the session is actually a really useful tool. Of course, that's what is important to do for the client anyway. But for me, as the coach, it's actually a really important tool because it's something where it draws us back to the focus of the session rather than on the chatter that might be, possible around it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So we're back. We're into the coaching and actually coming back to you and your thoughts. Is less likely. Okay. So I mean, I've sort of bookended these two extreme versions, if you like, to be able to see what your self-regulation is like. So if you think about yourself, how strong do you think your self-regulation is to see you're not going to go too formal and you're not going to go too informal? That's a massively leading question, but I'm asking it anyway.
Well, I'd say that depending on the client relationship and where we are, I think my self-regulation is better at the beginning of the client relationship than it is a few months in.
Yeah.
But I think I'm probably still relatively good at self-regulating, perhaps more than I thought I was at the beginning of this session.
Okay. And how's that feel?
Reassuring, actually, because I'm probably not tending into friendship or blurring those lines. I'm probably just allowing the relationship between myself and my coachee to develop in a natural way that feels good for both of us, but still maintains that kind of professional. I know you didn't want to use the word professional, but that's kind of divide between me being the coach and them being the coachee.
Let's talk a little bit about the coachee experience. We struggled to find a word at the beginning, but it was something nearly joy, but not quite joy, but certainly something like rich and very inclusive. The way that you are they getting that type of experience, or the experience that you want them to have?
Yeah, I think that it's not a very pretty word, but I think that I'd love them to feel like they're progressing. I think that's probably what we're looking for here, because it's more than satisfaction. We're not staying where we are. It's not running off the end and with great excitement. But I think I've done a good job, but I also really want the client to be feeling like they're progressing, because goals can change, and the variables around it are always changing. But even if I think about me when I've been coached, like to feel like I have the ability to keep moving forwards is actually the most valuable thing of all. So in terms of the client, the coachee experience, I'd love them, and I hope that they start the session in one place and they progress forward towards whatever it is by the end. And that's an experience that I hope that they're getting.
And how much of like your, well, we keep on using these words, like your interpersonal, your way of being as a human being, how important is that, as well as your coaching skills, influencing that for them?
I think they go together. Though the coaching skills are amazing, and the tools that we have as coaches and the change that we can support is just it's humbling. But we also bring our own personality to every single session. We're human. That's what we do, and we're all going to do that slightly differently. But I'd like to think that my personal skills are part of that, and that is not necessarily they're just important, but maybe they are, because I think that they're going to be intertwined in absolutely every question that I ask and every observation. And so I'm going to put them on equal par, because I just don't think that I can separate my skills, my interpersonal skills, to my coaching skills, just because even the way I express myself is going to be personal to me.
And how much more you talked quite a bit today about you as an early coach. How much more deliberate do you think you are on that interplay between the two than when you started?
I think I'm more confident to be myself. Yeah. I think that comes almost like that's a continual change for me, because it's change isn't the right word. Progress isn't the right word either, but it's a continuation of who I am. And the more that you practice coaching, you can be a super experienced coach. We are always learning. Like I almost feel like every session that I do, there's something new that I've taken away from it. I love that. I think it's so awesome. But I think that, to answer your question, since being an early coach to being now, and I'll be interested to see where I'm in a few years' time, it's almost like being able to sit with yourself in confidence as a coach and as a person is it's a skill that is just, well, it's constantly growing, I suppose. I'm certainly better than I was, and I imagine that I'll, in a few years' time, I'll be better than I am now.
So it's one of those evolving, we don't get to an end point type
evolving, that's the word I wanted. Yes.
Yes, it doesn't feel like, oh yes, I've completed way of being as coach, to work it. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Super, brilliant. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time. I've got a couple, if it's all right, I haven't got ideas or suggestions, but I have got a couple of takeaway questions that I'd encourage you to think about, like in the context of this. Firstly, it is thinking about really thinking about you as a supervisee in this session, and how the relational stuff has worked, like in terms of what I've shared, how much I've shared, how little I've shared. You know, I've just, I suppose, I've just tried to be how I normally am, but I'm aware that this is a topic that probably we have a shared interest. So just think about, you know, is it okay, those few bits that I shared? Was that not okay? What did that do for you? Did you not even notice those things I've said? And then the second thing is think about, like, you and me over time, you know, how our professional relationship has evolved, and, you know, would we, you know, we're friendly, right? And we do meet for 15 minutes before, we do have a chat and a catch up and make it feel fine, you know. What does that do for you, and how does that help? Because I think that, though, you know, there is a parallel in our supervisory relationship as there are in coaching relationships. So over time, just mull over those and just see, because you're in the good position of being like your coachees, being a supervisee, you know, so same type of thing. Is that all right? Are they useful?
Yeah, actually, that's very useful. It's a bit of a reframe, and something that's actually that's a very useful way for me to consider it. So thank you.
Right. Well, I mean, I didn't want to get into it today because, you know, this is your thoughts, but I thought a couple of takeaway. And I'm conscious that we didn't get into that second topic about you and discovery calls, but is this again something you can carry on reflecting on in the context of this relational work?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think that I was doubting what I was doing, whereas I think that today's session has been very much about, I suppose, for me, reassuring myself and knowing that I am being who I am being, and that's okay. And what might come from that afterwards, I need to just be confident in the way that I work and respond, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we can have a longer conversation about it another time, but it's been helpful anyway.
Good,
just
good,
to yeah, be reassured.
Well, I mean, I think that's something really interesting in coaching and supervision, when someone has a secondary topic that has a bit of a relationship to the primary one, and it sort of gets scooped up just by dealing with the primary one in more detail. So let's make sure this finishes well. So your learnings from talking all of this through these last 45 minutes.
Yeah. That I don't need to be quite so hard on myself, actually. I think that I question myself a lot, and actually sitting in the but when that actually came down to it, I am confident in who I am and my, you know, and the relationships I built. So I don't. Sometimes I'm like, have I just found a problem that wasn't actually there that I came with? But it's also I find it useful just to explore boundaries. I like thinking about where I was a few years ago when I was just starting out to where I am now, and I like looking forwards as well. Because that's quite useful for me. But I think that the big takeaway for me is like a reassurance and a confidence in who I am, and that's good, and that's okay. That's been a very, very useful part of this conversation today.
Good, I'm really pleased. And so I want to ask this question lightly about actions, because your actions may be more, you know, reflective and observing and noting things. So what would you take out of this conversation in terms of things to do?
Reflecting, definitely. I'm just interested in what you just brought up about our relationship and the way that we work together as supervisor and supervisee. That's actually quite useful. And then me thinking about that when I'm with my coachees, that's I suppose more reflective. But also I'm just going to try to, it's not an action in the traditional sense, but I just want to notice myself and just pay a bit more attention to me. I haven't recorded a session for a while. I feel like that might be really useful, just to record myself if the coach doesn't mind, and just have an opportunity to reflect. Because I think what I take away from coaching sessions, you know, when I think about them a week later or whatever, is not the same as how they went, of course. So I think that would actually be quite useful for me. But yes, I suppose it is another way of reflecting.
Yeah. Okay, so some reflecting and yeah, thinking and also but looking at your sessions. And what would you like to be doing with the information? If you imagine, I don't know, thoughts and feelings that you have over these next weeks, what will you do with that?
Um, I have to be honest, I haven't done the reflecting, like the writing reflecting for a
Mm.
while. Might do a little bit of that,
Mm.
a bit like journaling or just, asking myself a few useful questions because I think it's easy just to get busy and swept up in life, and then you kind of you kind of miss, like, I don't want this to be a session which is done and then I forget about it, and then in 2 months' time I'm wondering about my relationships again with people. I think I need to write a few things down that I observe about myself over my next few coaching sessions that I take on, and I feel like that would just help settle some of the thoughts that are in my mind.
Ah, thank you. And will this writing involve buying more stationery? Um,
um, No, I'm okay with my stationery. I bought three for the price of two or something, so I've got a spare.
there's always any excuse to go to Smith's or Muji. I always like, can I go get new pens on it? I can't do it without new pens. It's not possible.
Oh, you one of those.
Yeah, it is a bit like that, I'm afraid. Well, thank you. How do you feel as we get to the end of this conversation?
I always feel so much lighter after a supervision conversation. It's lovely to have a space that's just like, for me, it's it's massively useful, and really just clears some of the clutter that's in the mind. So yeah, I think just lighter and freer. It's a real privilege, I think, to be able to have sessions like this. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
And for me too, because these are like you observed. This thing is skills, but also personal. You've worked all day today about your personal stuff, and thank you so much for sharing it. And yeah, when we next meet, be really interested to find out your observations, and you might be interested to know it's definitely set off a load of similar thoughts in me, and I'm sure loads of coaches who'll watch this video will think, oh yeah, I have some of this as well. So you've provided a great service here today.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you.
It was a pleasure. Lovely to see you.
You're a social. Bye.